Hello and welcome to the LUMEN Project. I'm Dr. Helene, clinical psychologist. Today is a very special interview. We are joined by my dear husband, Anton Oliver, All Black superstar,
Oh,
father of two, love of my life. So let's get started. Hello, Anton. This is
hello,
the
wifey.
first time in 13 years that I've ever interviewed you.
Right. Well, I wrote an autobiography, and I believe you haven't even finished reading
No,
that.
I got to chapter 3. I was 29 when I was
I guess
starting
I'm just
to
not
read the
very
book.
interested. It doesn't speak volumes for you, does it?
No,
That's
it
my
doesn't.
well, maybe it's my writing style.
You've got to do an audiobook and then I'll listen to it.
No, maybe
Maybe I
I'm
could
just
do the
too boring.
narration. Hey guys, I'm Anton Oliver.
Since when did I have an American accent?
Oh, I just can't do a Kiwi accent,
Oh,
babe.
I know.
But
Girls
yeah,
love it though.
mm,
Clearly, it
it works with me,
reeled
babes.
you in.
Exactly. But actually, when I was reading your autobiography,
Mhm.
you wrote it 29 and I was 29. And I remember thinking, like, oh, I haven't really achieved anything in my adult life compared to you,
Right.
because you've just done so much.
Well, that's your perspective.
Well, obviously, you're always very humble. That's the Kiwi in you, babe.
Right.
But I was just curious, like, I think this high performance sport that you were doing in the
Hmm.
first chapter of your life probably came with a lot of sacrifices. And a lot of young people or clients that I work with, they want to achieve that excellence,
Right.
but are they aware maybe of some of the sacrifices? And I was just wondering, what you had to give up in order to achieve that
Well, I was
success.
young, right? I made the All Blacks when I was like 18 or 19. And so it didn't really feel like a sacrifice. It just felt like amazing. It was everything that rugby in New Zealand is a big deal, and I've wanted to be an All Black. I guess not hardcore, but I guess in my early teens, I sort of thought it as something that I wanted to do. When I started to get like serious, I used
Yeah.
to be quite chubby and overweight and pretty down on myself, and I had this like quite pivotal moment on a bus trip coming back from a South Island tournament,
Hmm.
and I didn't make the tournament team, but I had this feeling that I was good enough to make the team.
So you
And
felt robbed from the
I had, well, not
opportunity.
robbed, no. I just sort of had this moment where Nietzsche talks about like staring into the abyss and the abyss staring back, and I had this like existential moment. I remember it very clearly. Like my life can go one or two directions at this point. I can either like just believe in what people are telling me and that I'm kind of fat and not worthy and it's just gonna roll out with me like not making teams. Or I can like get grabbed by the scruff of the neck and try to do something about it. And that was I was 14 when I had that like epiphany. It wasn't really it was just a conversation I had with myself. I guess it was an epiphany. I was in a bus, in the back of the bus, just staring out the window, going like, do I want to be just subject to name calling and feeling like small and reduced and kind of be a self-fulfilling narrative that I'm giving the world this and they're playing it back and it feeds on itself and
Yeah.
before you know it I'm like 70.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like the start of it. And
So, so at that moment, you were like, "No, I want to
right,
claim my life. I
yeah,
think I can do it, and I'm going to go for it.
yeah,
Believe that I
exactly,
can,
yeah.
rather
And
than
so
believing the
right, so
naysayers."
it was, it's hard to explain, but it felt like very existential, like
Mm,
this is like a big deal.
mm,
I am not, of the two forks in the path, one of them was just like, I'm not going to do that. That is not a path that I can even countenance. So that is not even an option. And so then, like, path A was like, well, I'm going to go on that one.
yeah,
And so I say all of that because when you talk about, was it costs or trade offs or what I'm missing out, like, there was
sacrifices.
no sacrifice was like too great to force me back down that was not going to happen. And
Yeah,
so and then 4 or 5 years later, I'm like really super lucky that I'm very young to be in the All Blacks and very green, and on top of that, like a year later, we got paid. Right, so I'm
yeah,
actually getting paid to do something that I was going to do for free anyway. So there was no real, I don't see any downside for a young,
yeah.
no downside. As you get older, and at the other end of my career, it's kind of barbell.
Yeah.
That's when there are start to become trade-offs,
Yeah.
etc. But at the
And
start, no, it was all good.
okay, nice. And also, I guess, you've got that credibility. Like the All Blacks are like living legends in New Zealand, especially at that time with like Jonah Lomu and like,
Yeah,
you were the greatest team, right? Greatest team across all sports of all
yeah.
time, across all
Wow, yeah.
countries or something.
We hadn't won a World Cup though for a while, but yeah, Big Jonah he was my same age, and I made all the age group teams with him.
Yeah.
So yeah, hanging out with him was pretty kind of crazy. Like
Yeah.
he was the rugby's first and probably still only global superstar,
Yeah.
and he's my mate, just sitting next to me on the bus, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, this pretty crazy to think that where he came from and where I came from, very different backgrounds, but friends in this like
Mm.
All Black bus doing this thing, right?
But also, when you say very different, yes, very different. He was like an islander and things like that. But both humble backgrounds, I guess, right?
Yeah, right,
So
right.
again, yeah, I guess for you, it wasn't really a sacrifice. It was like, oh, I could live a humble, small life, being fat and
Yeah,
unaccomplished, or I could be a superstar, like a god in in New Zealand.
right.
Well, my words,
Hey,
not yours.
no.
um, but yeah, this is making it's interesting for me because obviously, now with what I'm doing, it's a
Mm.
bit more into that woo woo space. So people talk about manifesting and choosing a different timeline.
Yeah,
Um, and I think probably that language doesn't really resonate to your average Kiwi man.
right.
But I think what you're describing is that you realize you could choose your destiny or claim
Yeah,
a future, and you didn't need to just be on autopilot or just play it small. Like you could
no.
actually start to embody that and think, right, what does an All Black superstar do and how do they?
Well, let's just remove the superstar. But like two things were happening. Like absolutely, the shift was driven by fear. Like and also a bunch of other like negative. Like that is not. I don't want to do that. And I guess at the same time, when I started thinking about what path A, that's when if you use words like manifesting and
Choosing timelines.
right, what's that? Positive
No,
thinking.
it's like you're on a particular timeline, one trajectory of being a fat kid and nobody, and
Right.
you
Oh,
chose
right.
to shift.
Parallel. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Like
shifted.
movies talk about going through different doors. Yeah. 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 So that was all very creative, and I used to dream about it. When I was running, I used all of this. That whole notion of quantum mechanics, and that you can create your world, right? You're not reacting to it, you're creating it. And when I read all that literature and listen to podcasts of people doing that stuff, I'm like, dude, that's what I was doing. I had
Mm,
no idea that's what I was doing, but I was lost in an imaginative world which saw me as the central character, and I could see all the positive things and doors that I was going through. And it primarily came from like not that.
yeah, yeah.
But and it was kind of weird when it all happened. I'm like, oh, this is happening just how I thought it would. I kind of manifested it. Absolutely I
Mm,
couldn't have manifested it better, and it happened. Like I was really young because I was in rugby. You've got forwards and backs, and forwards are the kind of the bigger, more gruffer ones, and they're usually older men who are thick and punch people and are hardcore. And I was one of them, but I was just a kid, and
mm,
I made that. I think I was like just turned 19, late 8s, young, like super young,
amazing.
one of the youngest ever. And so it happened very, very fast,
Mm,
and I didn't really stop, and haven't really, don't often stop and think the power that I had to just I was lucky in that I was good at sport and I was good at rugby, so I was given. It wasn't as if I was like, I'm going to go off and try to learn the piano.
or be a
And
ballet
that would have
dancer.
been ballet dancer would have been an unachievable thing, no matter how much I wanted to do with it. Like that, probably, if you're going to mentor someone, that'd be like, let's just gently move you over, not the ballet dancer. So I was lucky in that I had an out, or the path that I chose was one that I was good at. I
Yeah.
knew I was big and fast as a kid. I could, I just had a feel for rugby. I kind of knew in playing the game, I could intuitively knew to go forward, and I could
Mm,
just see stuff. So I was good at it.
mm,
So all it needed was some application, right? And that came from the fear bit, right? I just need to start running and get fit and like make this like the single most important thing in my life. And
mm.
once I did that, then it was very easy to make decisions about, am I going to go out? Am I going to do that? It's like, well, is that serving that purpose or that purpose? And it was just, that was easy.
Yeah, yeah. And so I guess in the 90s and noughties, people wouldn't have been talking about, like embody your dreams and manifest this reality. But just for you, it was very clear what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
You knew you were good at it, and you
Yeah.
were just going to go
Right.
balls to the wall and just do it.
Yeah.
And I
And
think,
more importantly,
mm,
how that made me feel.
mm,
Right. Because it's the feeling thing that moves it. You can intellectualize it and you can see it, but what in the seeing and the dreaming of it, what was that was really related to was how that was making me feel, even in like a dream imaginative state.
mm,
I'd go for these hard runs, man, and I'm coming back and I'm almost fainting and sometimes vomiting, and but it was the feeling that gave me that I can do this, and I'd picture like being in the team and scoring the try, and that feeling that was the bit that I was after,
mm,
and I'd sort of just hearing myself talk now. I'd already moved away from the fear bit, right? The fear bit was kind of the catalyst, but now I was moving on to something that was driven by not fear but positivity and forward stuff, and
mm.
so that was I was getting fed by a different fuel source at this point.
Yes. And you may remember that's in fact what I did my doctorate on.
Oh, that's
Well,
right.
yeah, about
Yeah.
not being fueled by avoiding negative outcomes, but being
Right.
fueled by the things that you want to achieve. So,
Right.
like having positive.
Cheek, send me high. Was that one of
That's
the?
flow.
Oh,
That's
that's
the
flow.
being in your flow state. But I
Yeah.
guess in rugby, you are in your flow state. You can't
Yeah.
be thinking about what you want to make for dinner or if that girl doesn't like you because you're going to
Right.
get
Right.
smashed. So, you probably were in your flow state as
Yeah.
well.
Definitely some training runs you go on, and for whatever reason, it's just like boom, you're smashing it. You hit a pick, and
Mm,
you come out, and you're like, and when you're running, you're able to. You're not in pain. You can see things. Obviously, in games it happens, and that's a high state of flow because there's a bunch of stuff that you're unable to like control, but you're
mm,
able to react and see it, and that was super cool when that happened.
yeah.
It's kind of like that bit in the Matrix when Neo can see. He finally realizes he's Neo, and he can see like the numbers. And doesn't he stop the bullet, and he just sees the numbers? And
Mm.
if you're in flow state, which I got into a few times, and you play extraordinarily well, it's just like okay,
It's the best feeling, right?
that was easy. Why can't I do that?
Yeah.
Doesn't happen very often, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I'm curious. So I sadly never met your dad. So he passed
Right.
away when we just started dating, which is
Mm.
very sad, very young.
Hmm.
But I think some people attribute a lot of your success to your dad. Only father and son,
Right.
um,
All black
all black
captains.
captains. Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I
It's
remember
probably
that.
earlier in the book, later in the book,
Probably.
the chapters you never got to.
So I guess we can assume that some of his like build and his DNA you got, but from what I know, maybe some of the mindset stuff. It doesn't sound like he necessarily was a huge part of your rugby success.
No, and even assuming that, I mean, okay, I've only got genes from like 50% of him and 50% of mum, but Frank wasn't a very, he had a different like body type to me. He was leaner, probably more endurance based, whereas I was more like a Polynesian, where I was like more fast twitch, mesomorphic, like I could put on muscle quickly, but I could also put on fat quickly. But I was more of an explosive person, so that didn't really come from him. Yeah, so he left our family when I was 2 or 3, and he went lived with another. He went, so he had really no. Well, that's not true. I'd say he had no effect on me, but it was the shadow. It's what he left behind. It's the things that he didn't do. So
Mm,
yes, he did have a big effect on me, but not from anything that he did. It was
mm,
from what he didn't do
mm,
and the space that he left behind.
yeah.
So no father and all the rest of it.
Yeah. And so our friend and mentor Franco, he often talks about
Right,
how your core wound can be your gift to the world. Do you think
right.
that some of these negative experience like fueled you? Like obviously it didn't come from a positive place necessarily, but did you have something to prove
Yeah.
or
So
did
Franco talks about the core emotional wound that we all, I guess, have at some point. If you get on the other side of that, that's your core purpose. And so, I felt, I guess I felt rejected and abandoned and that I didn't belong. And so the inverse of that is like try to create spaces or sense of belonging.
mm.
So yeah, I certainly felt that with our family and our kids. So that's good. And I had that a
Aw.
bit.
You don't often say gushy stuff.
Right, yeah. This is very rare.
Hmm.
Uh, so there's that. I don't think I really understood because for a big chunk of time, I guess I wanted to be like him as a young boy.
Because
and
if
a
you're like him,
teenager.
you might be more
Well, he's
seen
just
or.
your old man, right? You look up to him, and in New Zealand rugby, he was like, pretty big deal. And even though I didn't grow up around him, when I was in the rugby circles, and people would say, it's Frank Oliver's son, he's All Black, and so there are echoes of his past.
Mm.
But then as you get older, and then you learn, my mum was amazing in that she didn't really tell us anything about the manner of how they divorced and what he did or didn't do. She just like kept that. And so as I became aware of more of that, and unfortunately I only really got the full handle of that after Frank had died. But anyway, I just became less enamored with wanting to be like him, and probably more like not wanting to be like him. So
Had like a kind of boomerang effect.
right.
Yeah, well, you'll remember me telling you about Dragon Lady, my
Yeah.
one of my very good teachers, and she said, generally people want to be like their parents, or they want to not be like them.
Will be
So,
repelled by them.
yeah, so I guess at a certain point, maybe you
Yeah.
crave his affection, his approval. You wanted to be a somebody like him. I don't know.
Right.
And then at a certain point, you were like, hang about. Okay, yeah, he was successful, but
Yeah.
was he a man of good
Right. Well, I
character?
just felt very rejected by him, even like from our kids. So he had 5 boys and a girl to another relationship. And I just felt of the 5, certainly of the 3 from the first, my 2 full brothers, I was the last of the 3. I think Mum and him, their relationship was kind of toast at that point. I was kind of an unwanted. They'd had Mum had had a miscarriage before me. He probably wanted to wrap it up. It turned up. Oh shit! Here's another child. I'm going to have to like hunker down. So I think he represent. I think he resented me even being here because that meant that he had to.
Hang around a bit longer.
Yeah, this is South Island of New Zealand, in the early 70s, mid 70s, quite conservative place, quite religious. You don't just have shack up with a bird and have kids and leave. Like, you don't do that. His folks were quite Catholic, so there would have been a sense of societal and family and kind of religious obligation that you need to do this. So I think just even me being born was like, oh man. And so, and then I wasn't like him, and I wasn't like my other 2. So the first son is the firstborn, so very traditional, and then the second brother was a lot like Frank, sort of underdog,
Yeah, a bit
aggressive.
plucky.
Right, I was kind of the fat cherub third kid who was the
The
cuddly
kissing
mum.
professor.
Yeah, that's right, the cuddly. And so he didn't like any of that, right? So
Yeah.
I felt hugely rejected on all of that fronts.
Mm.
And then, as I think a lot of kids do, because we don't really understand the world, we tend to internalize stuff and see what's happening and say, well, that's because of me. And I think, when he left and all the rest of it, and I picked up that he didn't really like me, it's like, oh, well, it's all my fault. So then you start taking all that heavy stuff
Mm.
on.
So I guess, a lot of people watching this maybe do have like big dreams and goals, but they feel like, oh, maybe I can't do it because I've got trauma or I've got issues. Like,
Right.
what would you say to that?
Well, based on everything I've just said, I would invert that and say use that as your fuel.
Put fire in your
But
belly.
right, because do you want to be a victim your whole life? Did I want to be a fat? I was objectively overweight, right? So they weren't they weren't lying. I was fat. They were truisms. But you're going to sit there and like just do that or take it on, or basically you're going to be a victim. But that's not how I thought about it. But being a victim is a great place to be because it's never your fault,
Mm.
right? You don't have to take any accountability or responsibility. Something's always been done to you. And so you can sit in the space of victimization and just like, it's a great place. There's no responsibility, accountability, but you're never going to go anywhere in your life, and you're going to always resent people. But like, if that's where you want to be, then it's all about choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
There's that wonderful book, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And he's like, there's a space before action, there's this little space where thinking happens, right?
Mm.
And that's usually, something that's a bit more quick, an emotional reaction, right? You say something that triggers me, but there's always a place of agency where you can control your thoughts and therefore, your thoughts and your behaviors and actions. And that's kind of what I did. Like,
Yeah.
on a more, the time scale was bigger, but I controlled my thinking, and I didn't want to be a victim. I didn't want to live like that.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to live like that?
Yeah, and I think there's this balance, isn't there, with like the generation of our kids, I worry that they're going to be a little bit soft, everyone's a winner or whatever.
Right.
And I think that we have to balance, yes, it's good to be compassionate and understand traumas and sadness, but there is, I think, at a certain point, you need to decide, are you going to pull your socks up and live this life that you want
Well,
to
that's
live?
the great thing about sport, and that at some point there are winners and losers. You either win the game or you lose it, right? And life's chunks of life are like that. Life has got a bunch of binary stuff in it. You go to get a job interview, you didn't get it, right? You go and
Yeah,
crack onto a girl or a boy or whatever your flavor is, and they don't want to. They don't want to take you. They reject your advances, and that's just how it is. And like part of our deal as being parents with kids is trying to prepare them for the world out there, so when we kick them out of the nest, they start flapping, they're able to flap under their own steam, and that's being able to take rejection
yeah,
and the bad stuff.
yeah.
And sport's great for that, right?
Mm,
Because there's at some point you kind of start at participation, and that's great, and work, and then you got the team social skills from a team sport perspective. But at some point, the result matters, and I don't know really where that is. Somewhere between the 10 to 14, somewhere in that space. Like the result, it's not just, oh, did you have fun when they come home? It's like, okay, yeah, but how did you go?
yeah, yeah,
Did you win or not? And
yeah.
then there's a difference, did you win, but you tried your hardest? That's
And you
different.
played
Then did
well.
you
Yeah,
win, you lost, but you didn't try very hard?
yeah,
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
a different conversation.
yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. All right. So, obviously, with the Lumen Project, I'm on this quest to find out what really makes us well. And the reason I wanted you to come on is because a lot of people think that chasing fame, sporting excellence, or, financial success is what's going to make them happy. I was wondering, do you feel like that sporting excellence has given you a lot of well being and happiness?
So I don't, yeah, what happiness and well-being and I don't know if they're all the same things.
Mm,
Certainly, it's like making the All Blacks made me happy, and some of the time it made me well, some of the time it didn't make me very well, like under a lot of pressure and all the
a
rest
lot
of
of
it. So
stress.
very stressful.
Mm,
And if you look at the most, if you think about some of the world's top athletes, someone like Michael Jordan, I mean, was he super happy? I don't know. I looked at his documentary. It's on Netflix.
mm,
He looked like he was so driven by winning that there was almost no enjoy. It was like a pathological desire or need to win. So when you go to that kind of level, I'm unsure whether he was. My definition of happy didn't look like he was happy.
mm,
Didn't have many friends. People didn't really. He wasn't very likable. Didn't look like a very connected husband or dad.
mm.
But he liked winning.
Yeah, and I guess that's some of those sacrifices that we talk about. If you
Right.
really want to achieve one thing to the absolute best degree, other
Right.
things
It
sometimes
comes with a
happen.
whole bunch of other stuff that
Mm,
doesn't necessarily come up on the tin,
yeah,
right? And that probably when you get a bit older and sacrifices have to be coming in, that well, you start to see them as sacrifices. So I was
mm,
in Dunedin, in the bottom of New Zealand, and I had lots of friends start to leave the town and start a life, have a wife or kid or girlfriend, or go overseas and do other stuff. And I was left there, and that's when I started to see the cost of playing. Right?
yeah. It requires singular focus.
Yeah,
You can't really have
and I
balance.
felt left behind. And where are all my mates gone? They're off doing that, and I'm still here doing that. Yes, I was playing for the All Blacks, so that's only a portion of the year, right? And
Mm,
then otherwise, I used to love this place, but now, like in terms of Dunedin, but now at a certain time in my life when I was a young student and like carefree, but now I'm like 30 and things are different and I'm still stuck here. And that's when it felt like a cost. And
mm,
so then the cost benefit of like, am I really happy and enjoying this? Yes, I am when I'm playing, but in the round, all this other stuff.
mm.
So I decided to leave, and that was the right time to leave.
Because I guess you had this extraordinary life, which is amazing, but maybe you started to crave something a bit more ordinary, or I don't know. How was it for
Well,
you?
it didn't feel extraordinary. I mean, there are lots of All Blacks. I don't think it's extraordinary, but
I think you're
well,
extraordinary.
but it's true that I was a professional rugby player for like 13 years, and my whole life was adult life was in the public eye. So it was a very weird
Mm,
experience. Um, So I was ready to leave it behind. It wasn't like so much about like do something ordinary, but it's like, okay, I've done this and I've done it for a long time, and I've proved that I'm been good at it. But what else can I do, right? And I guess there was also a bit of like trying to escape. My career overlapped with cell phones coming on and people having cameras, and that was quite a big thing. All of a sudden, wherever you went, now they can stop and take a photograph, and it's like, oh, dude, can I just like
So it
have my
started
lunch?
to
Right,
interfere with your
right,
life.
right.
Yeah.
And I didn't really want that. And then he's like, well, I don't feel like just the rugby guy. But at that time, you were the rugby guy.
Yeah.
And, I'll forever be attached to, a small bit of my life um, will always be referred to as, you're the rugby guy. And,
Yeah. Even now, like years on,
oh, yeah, and
it's
more so,
still,
right? It'll be forever, though. And it's a cool, ex-All Black, great, loved it. Didn't, but, gone on and done a bunch of other stuff. And don't want to be necessarily defined by, well, I'm certainly not going to define myself, but I have no control over how others do it, as, just the rugby guy, that bit of your life. And so, that started to really resonate with me when I was early 30s. Like, what else am I good at? What else can I do?
But before we jump into the transition, which we will, but so I can hear that some of the drawbacks are possible fame and everyone wanting a piece of you, your identity being so pinned to one thing when in fact you're a multifaceted person. Maybe it delays you getting on with your life and family. And then we haven't spoken about it, but things like injury and like concussions and things.
Right.
So those are all some of the drawbacks. But what I do know though is that high level sport can be exceptional for your mental health. So, there are studies that show that intensive sport can be more beneficial on your mood than talking therapy and medication combined.
All right.
Do you feel like that intensity of sport every day, working your body, training your mind, like, do you agree with this that maybe it kept you well?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it gives you something to focus on and do. There's a lot of pressure involved, and it took me a long time. I'm not sure ever really got, I don't think our mental health coaches really cracked the code until, unfortunately, I'd left. The notion of pressure, I guess I was always trying to not avoid it, but mitigate it. Instead of actually, I think the ultimate solution is to walk towards the pressure and acknowledge and accept that it's there. And in fact, that you need it. You need professional pressure in a high performance environment to get you from mediocrity to like the big moments in life, the big events. That's where you need to excel. And
Pressure makes diamonds.
right, exactly. And I think the All Blacks, not just me, but the All Blacks per se, we every 4 year World Cup cycle we kind of tried to avoid because we hadn't won one for a while. And that was a problem. I don't think we approached that problem with okay, here's pressure. Let's put our arms around it, welcome it in. We know that you're here. Actually, you're a welcome bedfellow. We need you. Let's come up with some skills and tricks and ways of helping you, helping me get familiar with pressure, and it's part of the deal. And because I think we always just trying to avoid it or put it over there or not acknowledge it. I don't think that was healthy.
Yeah, and there's a lot of psychology around pressure and stress. So I think that stress can come from feeling like you're out of control, and pressure is something more like, I'm not sure how you put it in your words, but it's like just an intensity of a situation. Do you feel like, because I know you told me you had high levels of cortisol, do you feel
Right.
like maybe you were kind of in stress because.
Yeah, more stress. I mean, when you're actually playing, you've got agency over what you're doing. It's more the stress leading up to it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think as you get older and you take on a bit more of the ownership of the team, the responsibility. When you're young, it's just like, I'm just here. I'm just like, I just want to keep my head down. It's cool that I'm here. The team doesn't feel like a part, like you've got any ownership. Yeah. But as you get older and you're a senior player, you definitely feel like the sense of like stewardship, and I'm kind of, it's my time now to be guiding this team as one of the older people. And that's where it gets a bit more stressful, because you're starting to think about legacy and performance, and your aperture of what you're focusing on is like a lot more. It's a lot wider. It's
Yeah,
not just you
and
and your
all
own.
with the public looking at you, judging you,
Right,
writing stuff
right.
about you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So all of that, yeah, and that if I didn't manage that well, that would take me away from enjoying it.
yeah, yeah. So we've spoken a lot about rugby and what I would say is like chapter one of your life. And when I came on the scene, you were slowly transitioning into chapter two.
Right.
So first off, I'm just really curious, like how did you go from the intensity of this glamorous rugby career to essentially just being a student at Oxford, living in student digs with 21-year-old me?
Right. Right. Well, that bit was easy. That was the transition that's way more challenging is into the workforce, because I had a year of study in the middle, and that was all interesting and curious, and
Mm,
but actually going in and putting a suit and tie on and like formalized work, and I was working in the city of London, that was really hard. The biggest challenge, I think, for professional sports people, and I listen to military people who transition as well, same kind of deal. It's like sense of purpose, from the military, obviously, and rugby. It's all prepackaged, man. Playing
mm,
for your country, fighting for your country, camaraderie, mateship, teamship, all of that. And then you go into a desk, and you've got to, and the whole thing feels like you've just been thrown off a train, and the train keeps moving, i.e., the military or the sporting team, and you're just jettisoned off, and
yeah,
there's no purpose, meaning, and you just have to find your way.
yeah.
And it's not there anymore. And try as you might, it doesn't exist. Moreover, what's even more difficult is that you go from like community goal, team, collective goals, which is there's obviously personal stuff in there as well. Wanting to be a good player, but you want the team to win. To My experience was in the financial, which is all just about getting as much money as you can, basically.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
yeah, you work in little teams and that, but it's all about how you can advance your career, and so it was a complete inversion of everything, and
mm.
I didn't enjoy it at all.
Yeah, so I guess you went from this sort of collectivist little ecosystem where if the team wins, you
Right,
all win,
right,
to the city, which is a bit more like I'll step on you to get ahead.
right. Yeah, it's just all about self, and it's all about money, and it's
Me,
not.
myself, and
It
I.
was so you couldn't get a further like this like disjuncture from where
Mm,
I was.
yeah, yeah. But despite everything, despite kind of starting late in business, in my opinion, you've done really well in business and you were
Right.
able, it seems, to really catch up and have
Yeah.
a, I think, a successful career.
Okay.
But I would say maybe that turbocharging of, having to make money and establish yourself in business, so seeking business excellence,
Yeah.
also maybe came with some sacrifices.
Yeah. What sacrifices?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess I see you had to be very focused on work for a long time. I didn't feel like, you had time to have, well, I don't know.
I
Maybe
didn't see
not.
them as sacrifices. I saw the skills that I learned in rugby. Once I figured out like like where am I going to point the gun,
Mm,
my intention, that took a wee while. That took 2 or 3 years just to right size myself. Then I just made some and it was quite hard because I'd come out of rugby, and I was kind of like 12, 13 years behind a lot of my friends who from university went straight into business, and now had rolled out all of that, and most of them were like partners in law firms, partners in accounting firms, had started their own business.
mm,
So they'd gone through that entire gestation period, they'd failed, tried stuff, and
established.
they were established equity owners in businesses, and I'd literally just been spat out, and I was at the start again, and of course I was looking at them as comparators of where I should be, and it was completely unrealistic. And they all look at me going, "We would have loved to have had your
Yeah.
career being an All Black for 13
Yeah.
years," and I'm looking at them going, "Yeah, but I want that,"
Yeah.
and it
That's like a
was
mental trap. It's called compare and despair, when
right,
you're like, I want that. And it's, yeah,
right.
we're all on our own
So
trajectory.
anyway, once I sort of figured out, well, this is what I'm going, what are my skill, like break down what my skill sets are, how are they going to help me get to where I want to get to?
Mm,
I just basically sort of had a thesis to myself that I thought I had a bunch of skills and experiences which were very hard to replicate from rugby, and
Which were?
which were kind of leadership of self and of others, decision making under pressure. Um, those things are like you can't just go to the internet and get AI to tell you how to do it. It doesn't. They are kind of felt. You have to experience those.
Yeah, yeah, like a lived
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, yeah. It's just you just don't go to encyclopedia and learn that. But I didn't know enough about anything. I didn't have enough domain knowledge in anywhere to like for those to come out, right? The only one I had was rugby, and I just left it behind. So I was like, right, I just have to hunker down, do my time, and my thesis was, or my theory was that once I get to a certain level, that I can unlock that and I can start deploying those skills. But I've got to just like make the cups of tea for a while. And I
Be
was like
humble for a while.
33, yeah, I didn't wasn't very humble. It's just like it was more expectations of I can't expect to get there when I don't know anything about this industry. I've got to
Sure.
learn about the industry before I can potentially help in leadership skills and potentially help navigate some
Yeah.
difficult conversations and conflict. Conflict is another thing that I think just by the very nature of rugby, right? It's very combative. When you're playing, certainly you've only got 80 minutes. If you're not playing very well, you know, conversations have to be said. We've got to right size it. So I just sort of felt that I need to get up the curve before I can start unlocking it. And thankfully, that theory came to pass. I worked for a business called M&G, and I kind of got promoted about 5 or 6 times in about 8 years. And
But I think there's two things about you, in my opinion, that make you successful. So one is if you have the eye on the prize, you're a bit like a dog with a bone. Like I see you having very like extreme focus on that objective and you kind of don't give up. And then the other thing is you're quite gritty, so I feel like you're someone who's not afraid to do the work. Running on Christmas Day or working late or traveling across London in the rain to get to work, those kinds of, I mean, and probably working really hard. I wasn't there.
right.
But I think your capacity for discomfort is quite high as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, probably. So for me, I just fix like what is it that I want to do, and that could take years to figure that out.
Mm,
But once you figure that out, then it's like, okay, well, so then I'm here and that's there.
mm,
What do I need to do to get there?
yeah,
Am I prepared to do it or not? And then it's just a basic. Well, you'd either do or you don't.
yeah,
Right? It's
yeah,
not hard for me.
yeah.
I don't see that as a difficult like mind experiment.
Yeah. I guess for me, what I see is like, in chapter 2, you have the experience, like the lived experience of being a strong leader and, taking care of a team, which you need then in business. You've got your focus and that belief that you can achieve your objective.
Right.
And then you're also quite gritty. You're not someone who takes sick days. I mean, once when you had an operation on your Achilles heel, you took a flight to go to a business meeting like the next day. You should have been on, so you're quite gritty and you don't make excuses. So I think those things are probably intrinsic to your character, but
Right.
also developed through sport.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. I don't make excuses. I can grit stuff out.
So just to take stock a bit, I think with excellence comes some downsides, maybe not sacrifices, but compromises in how you like establish your family or your business life, and that kind of thing. But it sounds like there are a lot of real gains that you got from um, competing at that like high level. Like you got belief in yourself, physical fitness. You probably got a lot of like adoration as well. I know whenever we go out, people are always like, "Oh my god, your husband," and they like massively man crush on you, and that's obviously good social capital for you as well.
I don't see that as social capital. But it has been, I found it more difficult once we've had kids in a family because I've pretty much in my life just done what I've wanted to do. And
Yeah.
maybe that was difficult for you when you were dating me, but I would say, pretty selfish.
Yeah.
And once you got kids in that, like I can't just, for the last basically 5 years, I've put the kids ahead of my own self
Mm,
interest, and that's been, I'm not, I haven't been desired or wired for like 40 years to think like that,
mm, mm,
and that's been hard
mm,
to stay at home and look after the kids when I want to be cracking on doing other things.
mm,
So it's hard. it's
The
hard to
split
turn it
focus.
off, right? It's hard to turn that thinking off
Yes.
and be like a family man
Yeah.
when actually I want to be out there like doing something new and like kicking some ass and doing something like that's extending me. And yet obviously parenting is extending me emotionally and from a patient's perspective, but I'm not out there swashbuckling like pushing new frontiers, and that's been quite hard.
Yeah, yeah. I think that single focus was really useful when you're in your 20s and you just kind of have to worry about yourself.
Right.
But then when you have to balance like family life, relationships, and all these different things, all of a sudden you're
Well,
like, oh,
basically just anyone out,
system,
anyone else and
system
anything
failure.
can't handle it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice. So we're at the end of our lovely chat. What do you
Right.
feel's like next for you? Like I feel sometimes I feel bad for you that you've had like all the adrenaline and this sense of accomplishment living this big life, and now you live, I guess, more of a pedestrian. Like it's still extraordinary in a way, but it's probably not the same highs as what you've experienced in the
No, and
past.
like I'm never gonna get those experiences again. I think the quicker, in terms of acceptance that any professional sports person or military person just accepts that they're never going to get into that type of situation with that camaraderie, in a bunker with guns, and that is never going to happen with sports.
Mm,
And so you recognize it for what it was, and that was cool for them. But
mm,
so yeah, I'm working, as you know, on a couple of ideas, which I think will be, if I can pull them off, will be the from my working perspective, my working life will be the things I'm most proud of.
mm,
So yeah, there's lots to play for.
yeah,
It's just like from a sports perspective, I'm not going to do any of that
yeah, yeah.
ever again.
Well, I like that because I think, with entrepreneurship, you doubt, well, I doubt myself all the time. And I guess sometimes you do, is it going to work, blah, blah, blah. But this conversation for me is a reminder that if you've got this dogged determination to pursue your goals, like no matter
Yeah.
what, then will it work for you? So,
Well, I mean, doubt's always there, right? And so, depending, like, if it's going to win, it just depends on how much you feed it.
yeah.
Like, if you just choose to feed that doubt, then it's going to grow and it's going to overcome you. So,
Mm,
best to like success or self fulfillment, or
mm,
feeling good or feeling bad.
yeah, yeah,
Both can win, right? But it all depends on which one you feed and you grow.
yeah.
That's from the one that'll grow. So I don't know whether that's going to work what I'm doing at the moment, but I try to think positive thoughts and stay
Mm,
away from the negative stuff, and just every day is a new day and a new opportunity, and that is, if I don't do that, then I drift to the bad stuff, and
mm,
that doesn't help me achieve my
yeah, yeah.
goals.
A good reminder, isn't it? Even if it's hard, just keep your focus on your goals.
Well, I mean, anything that I've valued in my life has been hard. Nothing that I truly value has come easy. So
Yeah.
nothing doesn't come easy.
Well, thanks. I mean, for me, that's actually a little pep talk that I needed to hear because
Right,
obviously, when I'm making changes as well with what I'm trying to do, and it is challenging and it is hard. But if I can make it, it probably will feel great because
right.
I
You can do the
face my
dishes a
fears.
few extra times as well. That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the washing.
I mean, yeah, we
I
could
do all of
just
that.
look really beautiful and get some Botox done and just.
Right.
But yeah, it will be more of accomplishment if I do something hard and succeed. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, well, thank you. This is very interesting little
No, no, we don't do
conversation.
that. We handshake after.
No, we
Oh,
have
no.
Thank
I've
you.
never kissed an interviewer. That's the first.
Yeah.